All right, guys. So we're going to start hopping into the next section of the show, which is going to be covering retro game prices in 2022. Just a brief look back at some of the stuff that's happening there. Our thoughts and opinions on 2023. So back in our previous video, we had mentioned that we felt that things were on the decline and that things would continue that way. So right now, we're just going to do a quick look back and kind of discuss if we think that we were correct. Are things still declining? Have they declined in the past 6 months? And talk about if things will still decline. But let's look back at that video and talk about that right now. Wes, were we correct? Did things continue to decline between July 2022 and today in December 2023? 2022. Oh my God.
2022. I want to say I think we were correct because just looking back on 2022 as a whole, it was there's some standouts, a lot of peaks and valleys, a lot of pricing going up and down, and it was still, but as a whole, yes, I saw prices drop. Some significantly, some just a little bit, but I think they're all starting to go back to pre-pandemic levels. Perfect example was I found a new retro game store in Central Jersey, and earlier in the year, and they had Resident Evil for the Saturn, and it was like $600. I was like, wow, okay, I need it. I'm
Let
not
me
paying
ask you a
six hundred
question.
dollars.
Let me just throw this in here. Was that sealed or complete in box or what was that?
It was complete in box,
A complete, so not sealed. It was
not
six hundred
sealed.
dollars.
Yep.
My
I went
lord.
back several months later, and that same game, he changed the price to like 275. So of course I scooped it up like right then and there. I was like,
So
wow,
that complete in box copy lost, according to that store, lost half its value.
that's a lot. That's a lot. So I was like, wow. So that right there, yeah, that it shows me that prices are starting to come down.
That's certainly significant because if you guys, I know you guys didn't work in stores before, but Wes and I have worked in. Wes still works in a retro game store. I mean, typically you're not buying these things at a high level because you're gonna reduce your risk because the risk is you buying the item from the person hoping to having to resell it. So I'm assuming that this guy probably bought that for around that price, and he's probably trying. He was probably trying to sell it for like twice the price. That's usually what you do because you don't know how long things are going to sit there, especially a high priced game like that. So my guess is this guy probably paid around 300 for it if he was selling it for 600, and now he's paying 275. He's probably taking a slight hit just to get it out of his door, or maybe he's just trying to break even on the item. That's my opinion. Do you think that's a fair estimate, or do you think I'm kind of off?
It could be. I mean, he might have. Who knows? I mean, he might have bought it for 150 bucks, 200 bucks,
That's true.
and then then the prices. He tried to capitalize on it because the prices skyrocketed, and he's like,
Yeah,
hey, if I can get it, hey, I ain't mad at you. If he can get it, get it.
yeah.
Especially because Resident Evil, it was an expensive game. It was a very expensive game at one point.
On
You know,
Saturn.
on the Saturn. So then prices started to drop. So he adjusted his price accordingly. So I don't think he lost any money, but it just goes to show that that bubble that we were in
Hmm.
on a good majority of the titles, I think kind of just finally burst, and things are starting to come back down to a normal level, if you want to call a $200 $300 game normal.
No, I mean, I agree with you 100%. Like, if you look at the numbers across the board, whether you're looking at sealed or, we can get into some more nitty gritty in a few minutes. We're actually going to discuss some specific titles, but I feel that we were definitely correct over the past 6 months. I feel like the bubble has more or less burst. There was definitely a bubble, and I think there was many factors, but I think the biggest one was the pandemic that really drove up the price. Go ahead and look at price charting, guys. Like you'll see 2020 it starts to go like this, 2021,
Hmm.
and then for the most part you'll see 2022 starting to go like this. Like that's pretty
Yep.
much what you're going to see if you look at price charting for most titles, not everything. And one thing I do want to reference, shout out to Game Eye, which we bring up quite often. This is how Wes and I both track our collections that we have. Game Eye shows you your overall value, and the first indication that I had, which I mentioned in a previous video, was back in July, was I noticed that the value of my games that shot up was starting to go down. and then I started looking at individual titles, and that's what brought on the July video. Was like, we got to talk about this. Like, this is it. Like, this is it. It's ending. Um, my game eye has continued to drop. It has not gone up at all. I've I've only spoiler alert. I collect video games. I've only bought more video games in the past 6 months, and the value has gone down. That doesn't make any sense unless the market is dropping, which is what's happening. Did you check your game on? Do you know if it's has yours gone down in 6 months, or do you not
Oh,
really
it
know?
definitely. Oh no, it definitely has. Every time I add a new game to the collection, I see it's taking a dip. It's taking a dip. I mean, I'm not in it for the money.
Right.
I'm in it
I'm
for the
not either.
enjoyment. So I'm in it for the enjoyment of my collection and playing the games. So, it is what it is. But it's making me more aware that okay, the market is definitely kind of trying to level off a little bit. And
Right. So we should have mentioned this in the beginning. Like Wes and I are collectors. We're not here for the money. Um, I find it extremely fascinating, so that's why I pay attention to it. Like it's just interesting to me to see the market. Like it has ebbs and flows. It always has. It always will.
mm-hmm.
But the most interesting thing has been the pandemic and just seeing it just go like skyrocket. And since then we're starting to see it drop, and that's fascinating to me. If you guys are fascinated by it, I hope that's what you're getting out of this. If you're following the market, you can listen to us also. But we're not experts. I'm using price charting to like look at the value. I'm using Game Eye to tell me how much my collection's worth. Like I'm not doing any mathematical analysis. I'm just using the data that already exists from smarter people than me that made programs to track all this stuff. So take what we say with a grain of salt, but we were right. And as long as we're paying attention, we'll probably continue to be right about the ebbs and flows at least.
Just an observation.